Hey guys, welcome to my 5,000 subscribers Q&A. I always get questions in my comments which aren't always specifically related to the video, and I don't often have time to answer all of them. So I just thought, basically I'll just do a Q&A, people can ask me whatever they want and, I'll answer them, and yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing today really. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the questions. The first one comes from Slayer GT, who asks, what do you think about the arguments that GT7 suffers from being rushed and incomplete due to COVID and also being added to PS4? So that's an interesting one. I think it may have, well, COVID may have had some impact. So I think most likely it did delay the game by some amounts. What most people forget is that between, when the game was revealed in June of 2020, for the next 15 months until September 21, we basically heard nothing about the game. Nothing. There was like no information at all, which is quite strange. And I think COVID most likely had a big part to do with that. I think what happened is probably Sony was saying, okay, we need to reveal the game, because obviously that's when they were releasing the PS5 back in 2020 as well. And obviously they wanted to build up that hype. So I think that's most likely what happened, is that they, said reveal the game, obviously give them enough time to work on it, and then yeah, until 15 months later we basically didn't see anything else about it, which I always thought at the time was really strange. Like, why would you reveal a game and then not say anything for 15 months? That would kind of like kill the hype, don't you think? But yeah, I think that's probably due to COVID, and Sony obviously telling them that they had to be announced for reasons. So yeah, that was one thing. But yeah, in terms of the game being incomplete because of that, personally I don't really think so. So I am actually going to talk about this in my next video. In fact, so yeah, it's kind of a case of, I don't think the specific issues that I have with the game, and a lot of other people have with the game, don't seem to be time-related issues. So things like the overall structure, the events, the progression, the reward systems like roulette tickets, things like that. I don't think many of those, if any, were really related to time issues, personally. It feels like more than anything they just didn't really have a direction, or at least they had a direction, but ultimately the direction they chose wasn't, a lot of us don't really like it personally, and I don't feel like it's a complete Gran Turismo, but in their view what they've made is what they were trying to make, is what they envisioned. That's personally what I feel anyway, and when I look at the game, that's kind of what I see. And the telling, or the most telling thing for me personally, is that 14 months later, after the game's come out, basically hardly anything's been changed. Outside of the first few weeks when they, what did they do? They added a few events, they added those mission events, boosted the circuit experience payouts. That's pretty much it. But after that, they've hardly done anything, really. And again, this is something I'm going to talk about more in my next video, but it feels like with GT7, they launched the game with a specific roadmap of what they wanted to do with it, and they're just kind of following that roadmap. So regardless of the issues other people have, the ways people think it's lacking, and appears incomplete, appears like it's been rushed. Personally, I don't think it has been. I think that from Polyphony's perspective, it's all gone to plan. This is the game they kind of wanted to make, and yeah, ultimately not really responding to any feedback, which is kind of how we've ended up where we are, really. Okay, next question comes from I Can't Think of Name. That's a great name. They ask, what made you want to start making content? So yeah, a few reasons for this really, that all sort of, I guess, came together. The first one is what I felt to be sort of like a content vacuum. So a specific type of video that I wanted there to be, that I personally wanted to watch as well, but I guess wasn't really being made a whole lot. So this isn't specifically about my series with GT7, my GT critique, where I go through and, just sort of break it down and talk about the state of GT7. It's not just that, but I guess sort of videos of this type in general. So sort of like video essays, retrospectives, breakdowns about racing games, and in particular, more specifically, Gran Turismo. Because of course there are some content creators who do make those sort of videos about racing games as well, but with Gran Turismo there was hardly anything, really. I mean, like, from what I can see, 95% of the content made about Gran Turismo is sort of like those videos where you get people just talking about specific things they're doing in the game. So most of the time it's usually online, people playing sport mode, daily races, whatever, or people making, easy money guide videos, things like that, setups, whatever, which is fine. Obviously, those videos deserve to exist, but it's just like I didn't really understand why people weren't making those more, I guess, I don't want to say high effort videos. Obviously, they take long to produce, but, if there's that hole, I'm surprised no one, kind of stepped up to try and fill it in a way. So I'm like, well, I might as well. Might as well give it a go, obviously. Coming in with no experience, I didn't know how well it was going to go, but yeah, it's turning out all right so far. The second thing really was, I guess, my own personal situation. So personally, I was at a point in my life where I thought, why not? Why not just try this? It's always something I thought would be interesting to make YouTube videos, but never really seriously thought about. I just always thought about it in the back of my mind, being like, yeah, that'd be interesting. I'd have some ideas here and there, but nothing too serious. But yeah, I just decided, one day I was like, I've got nothing to lose. Why don't I just put one video out that I really, feel passionately about, and see how it does, see how people respond to that, and see where it goes. And yeah, it seems to have done pretty well, given that the first video I did took off really unexpectedly. Then I thought, okay, I've got this golden opportunity. Basically, hardly anyone gets an opportunity like this. I might as well go for it, see how far I can take it, see what I can do, and yeah, that's kind of where I am now. And yeah, at this point, I'm just trying to make videos that really interest me, and hopefully, of course, other people as well, you guys watching this, the type of things that you want to see, whether it's specific topics about Gran Turismo and other racing games, which I just don't really think get talked about enough. That's kind of the key point, is I don't think there are enough videos being made of this style and of the specific topics that I talk about. Of course, not just, like I say, not just within GT7, but within racing games and Gran Turismo. These wider ideas, that's what I think is really interesting, and that's personally what really appeals to me, and really gives me that impetus to make these videos in the first place. Tim asks, why is GT3 your favourite in the series? So yeah, it's quite well known. I've talked about it a few times that GT3 is my favourite. I consider it to be the best game, the best Gran Turismo game. And yeah, there's a few reasons really. I mean, to put it simply, GT3 does what I want from a Gran Turismo game the best out of all of the games. That's basically the bottom line. What I mean by that mainly is the experience of playing through the game just feels the most fleshed out. It feels like they kind of looked at what they had. They looked at the cars, the tracks, and they thought, how much of a game can we squeeze out of this? And my God, they squeezed a hell of a game out of it. They did. It was seriously impressive. And, you got to consider, I guess, the circumstances around GT3 at that point. The fact that, it was supposed to be a launch title for the PS2, got delayed by a year, and then came out, and, ultimately that was so worth it, the game being delayed at that point, because it became, I can imagine a scenario where they didn't delay it, just came out as GT2000, and it was alright, but, kind of an in-between game that kind of got forgotten about. But the fact that they really stuck it out and made it into something truly memorable is it is really special. So yeah, that's what I love about it. It feels like GT3 is like the perfect sequel to GT1 and 2. It's like a perfect evolution of those previous games. Even though I didn't play, obviously, when I was a kid, I didn't play those two games originally, but then going back and seeing, the ideas that they pulled through to GT3, it's like, yeah, there's kind of like the perfect evolution in a way. So it's really impressive. And although, obviously, I don't know if your comment is specifically around this, but I'm just going to pull it in this direction anyway, is, I guess, why I like it more than GT4. Because there is a sentiment from some people that basically GT4 is pretty much GT3, but with more. More cars, more tracks, more features, more things to do, more polished kind of thing. On the surface, yeah, that is true. I can see why people think that way, but when you really dig beneath it, it's not. I don't think so anyway. They're very different games in a lot of respects. And in some ways I feel like GT3 does the core elements better than GT4. The main point I have is that GT3 feels like the final GT game that was fully focused on being fun and truly engaging to play through. to me anyway. It feels like with GT4 they started to get those more realistic elements. I mean, realism is fine, obviously, but when you have things like the handling model, and you go from GT3, GT4, where, you know, a lot of people, myself included, think that GT4 is just way more numb, less responsive, not as fun. But at the same time, you know, you had people, you know, real racing drivers at the time saying that it was more realistic, and it's like, okay then, but the game isn't as fun. So, you know, and that's kind of a theme going forward with the series, to be honest, from that point, which is unfortunate. Also with how they sort of do the event structure, I much prefer the way GT3 does it, by just having everything there, and then you can, you know, just go through and do what you want to do, whereas GT4 has things hidden. You know, you got like the one make events. I love the one make events. Obviously they give cars purpose, which is great. You know, if you watch my videos, how much I think it's important that the cars in the game actually have purpose, they have races to use them in, and obviously the one make events give that to a lot of cars. The problem is that for GT4 there's like way more one make events than there are any other core races, like races you'd have like beginner and amateur league, which just seems wrong, and I never liked that balance. So yeah, that's one thing. And also how they are unbalanced in a way. You know, you have like infamous events like the Opel Speedster Cup, I think, where it's like ridiculously hard for no reason, and then you have other events like the one make event for Subaru, the Subarus, which is not too difficult, but you get like a really good prize car, and it's just like, it doesn't feel like the balance is quite there. Whereas GT3's balance was almost perfect. Could feel like a grind at times getting through the early events, but it was near enough perfect, and that whole experience is what I want. I mean, this is just talking about briefly. I might talk about it in detail another time, but yeah, that is why GT3 is my favourite, and yeah, to this point hasn't been matched yet. Hopefully there'll be a game better than it, a Gran Turismo better than GT3, because I think for as good as it is, you know, it's not perfect. None of them are, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see if things change, because obviously GT7 is not the game to go better than it, but we'll see. Bambus Bjorn, I think I said that right, says, no question, but keep up your great work. Your videos are really good. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, no worries. I'll keep doing what I do, and hopefully you'll keep enjoying them. Thanks. Guru Lagama asks, are you going to make more videos on different racing games? Because I think you could probably do this full time, since you're clearly very talented at video creation and you have something interesting to say. Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, yeah, that means a lot. It's it obviously is, I guess, a passion to make these videos. Obviously when you start out, it always has to be a passion just to get it going. But the thing is that I do actually do this full time right now, funnily enough. I'm fortunate enough to be in a situation where I actually have the time to really try and make this into something. Obviously long term, if it doesn't work out, you know, that's what it is. But given that, you know, people really enjoy what I do, the feedback I've gotten, obviously the views relative to my experience, and obviously the number of subscribers I have, it's very encouraging. So yeah, just gonna keep doing it, keep making more, and we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, definitely other racing games for sure I want to talk about. Gran Turismo comes first, since obviously it's the racing game that I've spent most of my life playing, the one that I feel is the most important to me, and I have so many ideas for videos that I want to make, specifically videos that I felt like should have already been made by other people but weren't. So obviously I'm just gonna make them myself and put my ideas into them. But yeah, the thing is, when talking about other games, my videos, the style I do with, you know, the essays, the retrospectives, they require me to know a lot about the games, basically almost know them inside out, which for Gran Turismo is fine, because obviously I spent my entire life playing them near constantly. But if I need to talk about, or if I want to talk about other games, I'll have to play through them, firstly, play through all of them, and obviously do more research behind them, understanding things like the development of them and specific, you know, ideas and things behind them like that. I mean, if we use, say, Forza Motorsport as an example, I played 3 and 4, which a lot of people consider to be the best 2 in the series, so that's quite fortunate. But yeah, I did play through those 2. But if I want to talk about maybe those games, and not, because obviously when I make a video, it's not just specifically about the game, it's the context of the game, you know, what it represents and where the series has come from, depending on, you know, the specific topic. But the point is that I would need to go and play the first 2 games to really fully understand that, because if I didn't, I wouldn't really feel like I was doing due diligence and feel like I could miss things if I tried to talk about those 3 and 4 but didn't play 1 and 2. And then obviously if I want to talk about the series after that, 5, 6 and 7, and then the reboot eventually when that comes out later this year. But obviously those are all ideas to look into in the future. But yeah, that's I guess the kind of mindset I have. If I'm going to do something, I want to do it properly. So yeah, got to put in the effort to make it work. When you talk about racing games in general, though, it's kind of those concepts and those ideas within racing games that I've observed, having basically played games like these for my entire life. And I think injecting that experience that I have, obviously I don't have the experience making videos, or I didn't when I started, but it's the idea of having that experience of these racing games that I guess is really what's made my content the style that it is, and allowed me to see things the way that I do. So yeah, obviously thank you for saying that I have interesting things to say, but yeah, like I say, it takes a bit of work to make it into a video beyond just knowing what I already know. So yeah, more to come in the future, but yeah, that's what it is for now. CSBR75 asks, could Gran Turismo benefit from a spin-off in the same way Forza benefited from the Horizon sub-series? Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, some people would say GT Sport was already a spin-off, so, maybe they've already done it. But, again, more realistically, Tourist Trophy, that was a spin-off, a genuine spin-off. So could they do Tourist Trophy 2? Potentially. I mean, I'd want to see it. Again, this is something I'm actually talking about, or going to talk about in my next video. The idea of Tourist Trophy 2, what's been said about it already anyway. But yeah, for sure. I mean, if they have interesting ideas, I think that's the important thing. If they actually have something interesting to add to it, that's what's going to make the difference. So, I mean, if we use the example of Forza with Horizon, having that open world spin-off game, if Gran Turismo were to do something like that, they need to have something to add to it. I wouldn't really think it's a good idea just to make it for the sake of making an open world racer. So it's just like a generic Gran Turismo open world racing game. I mean, maybe they could do it the other way around, add an open world to Gran Turismo, potentially. Again, though, they need to have interesting ideas for it, rather than it just merely existing for the sake of it existing. Just for them to say, people have asked us to make an open world racing game, here it is, because ultimately it's not really going to work if they don't have an interest. You can't really force a creative work, because inevitably it's just not going to be very good. And from Gran Turismo's perspective, potentially could even dilute their brand as well, which obviously we don't really care a whole amount, but that's the sort of thing they need to consider also. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the open world's perspective, so for example, Horizon, it sort of has that car playground sort of aesthetic where, it's just like playing with, Hot Wheels. I mean, quite literally in some cases, but with the DLC. But yeah, where you're just like flying cars off cliffs and doing crazy jumps and whatever, putting ridiculous 1,000 horsepower engines into minivans and hatchbacks and, stuff like that, It's just like, it's fun, it's a car playground sort of thing. And then you have like Need for Speed, which is more about street racing and the street racing culture, sort of more underground, and sort of representing those ideas. And then obviously that's reflected in the gameplay and the aesthetic and all of that. And then you have something like Test Drive Unlimited, which is more about the lifestyle, where you have it's all about the higher end cars and the luxury houses, the clothing items, things like that. It's about the lifestyle, and that's, again, is another take, and again reflects itself in the gameplay. I mean, just a note on Test Drive, I really hope the Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown that comes out is going to be good, because I played Test Drive Unlimited too. I thought it was excellent. Handling model was a bit weird, but other than that, it was really fun. So many good memories, so I really hope they don't mess it up, dear God, please. But yeah, basically, if Gran Turismo can find their own take, which makes it stand out, then yeah, I don't see why not. Why they can't make an open world racer, as long as it's interesting, and like I say, they have an idea that means that you play it in an interesting way, and it's not just Gran Turismo but Forza Horizon, or Gran Turismo but Need for Speed. It's Gran Turismo, it's an open world racer, but it is something interesting. That's the important point. Denizu asks, whose eyes is it that you've stolen? Listen, if you know, you know. Toru Button says, "Hi Ruffle, if you can implement a game mechanic from outside Gran Turismo to make the game better, what would it be?" Yeah, I mean, I've got a few ideas, really. The thing is, my videos mainly talk about Gran Turismo 7 from the perspective of what it's missing from the older games. So what the older Gran Turismo games did better that it didn't quite, live up to, that sort of thing. But obviously, yeah, things can always be added, new and interesting ideas. I think that's an important point as well. So for me, I mean, it's not one specific mechanic, but I guess I'd say a set of mechanics that are all sort of related to one another. So personally, as a fan of, motorsport, real-life motorsport, I would love to see more features that are sort of centered around that. So one of them, in particular, would be a true multi-class racing system. So actual structured multi-class. So, for example, in the game, you could have an event which is for Super GT, for example, the Super GT cars, and you've got two classes of cars, obviously. You've got GT300 and GT500. So what they could do is they could have that event existing in two forms. So one is where you drive in the GT300, and another where you drive GT500 in that specific class. But the thing is, the other class still exists and is still racing on the same track, just like, obviously, the real life series. I think that would be so cool. And then you're battling in GT300, and then every few laps you've got the faster GT500s coming around to lap you, just to spice things up. That would be so awesome if they did that. Obviously, the AI, as I've shown, currently in GT7 is not built for that. It's not designed to do that, and as such, it's just a mess. If you try and set up a custom race like that, it just doesn't work. So obviously, the whole game would have to be, or the whole AI computer opponent system would have to be modified to make it work, basically, which frankly I think they should do anyway, regardless if they add multi-class or not. But that's what it is. And other things, I guess, again, related to the world of motorsport, they could add things like mechanical damage. They already have mechanical damage, but like a more fleshed out system where you have individual pieces of the car getting damaged and how that affects the car, losing gears, maybe losing power, things like that, beyond just the generic damage that we have in GT7 currently. And then you could add like full mechanical failures potentially, and then repairs, doing pit lane repairs, how long that takes depending on the amount of damage, things like that. You can have safety cars. If you have cars crashing, you have cars retiring, actually allowing cars to retire from a race, things like that. And you can have safety cars. You can even have red flags potentially if, with the weather system they have, if the track gets too wet, it can get monsoon conditions, and then the race gets red flagged. That'd be a great idea as well. I mean, those are just a few ideas. A lot of those pull from, I feel, the Formula 1 games, Codemasters Formula 1 games, which have a lot of those ideas, because they're trying to actually simulate the experience of being in a race. And that's the thing, because those games have always done that better than, say, Gran Turismo or Forza, which is just trying to, give you a sort of race, but it's not like the elements that actually would make it a race in real life, if you see what I mean, aren't really considered that important. So yeah, it's just kind of adding those ideas, which I think would be really cool. And I mean, I'm not saying all of these things should be like universal, like you should be in the Sunday Cup and having, mechanical failures and safety cars. Obviously that'd be ridiculous, but it's the sort of thing that I'd want to see being added as you progressed through a game. So for example, with say GT3, as you progress, they add more things. They add like tire wear, longer races, things like that. It's again one of those things where like as you progress, you could add, safety cars. They could add mechanical damage at a point. Then they could add multi-class racing, and all of that adds up until you get to the late game events and championships where you have all of that put together, and it's like a true motorsport simulation where it actually really feels like you're in a race, and you have all of these different elements and the unpredictability that comes with it. I mean, that would be so incredible, and I think that would really bring out the potential of what Gran Turismo could be if they were interested in making that. Obviously that's a question mark, but yeah, it's just the idea of keeping to adding things and keeping things interesting. That's what I want to see the most. Yeah. Firestorm GT says, "Congrats on hitting 5k. Thank you very much. Which racing livery is your favourite?" So, I mean, there are so many racing liveries through history that are just so iconic. Not only iconic, but just brilliantly designed as well. It's hard to choose, but the one that sprung instantly to my mind when you asked the question was, or when I saw the question, was the 1999 Jordan Formula One livery, the Buzzin' Hornets livery. I'll put a picture of it on screen so you can take a look if you're not familiar. But yeah, this is the one that always stands out in my mind. You know, the contrasting colours, the yellow and the black, the sharp angular design, and the motif with the hornet as well. It's just so cool, and I think in a lot of ways it inspires a lot of the liveries that I actually design or have designed in say Gran Turismo with the livery editor. So yeah, that one's definitely, if I had to pick one, that would probably be it. But I mean, there have been so many good liveries. I mean, for example, like classic Martini racing liveries with the Martini stripe, usually on the white background, just look fantastic. Like always, look brilliant. And most Castrol liveries as well look fantastic. I mean, the first you think of is like the Castrol Supra from Gran Turismo. You know, that's iconic. Also, other Toyotas, like the Toyota rally cars, like the Celica and the Corolla, were Castrol liveries. And also in the Honda NSX, the Mugen NSX has had a couple of Castrol liveries as well, and they look brilliant. So yeah, those, if I had to pick some standouts, it would be those ones, yeah. Yuria asks, not exactly a question, but I think it'd be interesting to do a breakdown/critique video of all the Gran Turismo games, primarily GT3. I think it's cool when people have to talk about what's bad in their favourite things. But if you want a question, do you think Polyphony will even bother with city tracks at all for GT7? I really love them in past GT games, and it actually made me sad to see that there are none of the iconic ones back in the new game. Also, keep up with your videos, they're amazing and super well done. Thank you, thanks for that. But yeah, I mean, talking about older games, once I can record my own footage for them, so whether natively from a PS2 or if I go the route of emulation, then for sure I will, obviously. I'll be making a lot more videos around those as well. Specifically, those older games, not just retrospectives, talking about them as part of it, but I mean like specifically talking about the old games. The thing is that people often like to consider those games as, you know, near flawless masterpieces, but they're not. You know, being realistic as someone who loves them, they're not. They are lacking in quite a few ways. So whether that be things that are lacking by today's standards when we look back at them, but even things that were, you know, lacking at the time. So, you know, here's just a few things. The fact that until Gran Turismo 5, there were only, you know, 6 cars on the track at a time. There was no changeable dynamic time or weather, hardly any customization, no visual or mechanical damage, a real lack of, you know, exotic cars, exotic brands like, you know, Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren, you know, whereas, you know, a lot of other games at the time had those brands as well. So that's one thing. And I mean, just general annoyances that I guess not specific to Gran Turismo, but just general games from that era. So for example, one specific thing is in Gran Turismo 3, when you go to the upgrade shop and equip something, it takes like, you have to press like confirm 5 times to actually buy and equip whatever it is that you've bought. It's just like, why? It's so dumb. But yeah, it's just those small things as well that that can be annoying. I mean, I've talked with GT7, you know, the bizarre design choices that they've made, but frankly, it's kind of always been like that in Gran Turismo. They've always made some bizarre design choices. I mean, not to the degree of GT7, where it really, you know, detracts from enjoying it, but a lot of them are still questions, you know, things that you see and you're like, why? This doesn't make any sense, and it's kind of always been like that. I mean, like I say, when I talk about these games, I will go into detail about the specific things and specific issues I have with them. But yeah, definitely it's one of those things I definitely want to do as well. So your second part, talking about the city tracks in GT7, obviously in my last video I showed the interview with Kaz, basically saying that they can't really make them, or they can, but it wouldn't be really worth it because it takes them so long that they just can't justify doing it currently. But I mean, another part that he mentioned in the interview is if technology and techniques improve to the point that they can, then they will. So, you know, the idea is that they can, and they still have the idea to do it. It's just that, you know, currently it's not worth doing for them. So hopefully there will be in the future. I mean, what I'll say though is most likely we're not going to get back the classic circuits. That's personally what I think. You know, classic street circuits like Seattle and Rome, you know, tracks like that. But I really hope we do, because obviously they're very iconic, and I think they're great as well from the older games. But yeah, we'll probably end up getting some new street circuits as well, which hopefully they're interesting, because yeah, the street circuits in Gran Turismo have always been quite creative, quite interesting, and one of the best things about them. So yeah, we'll see. Slayer GT with another question asks, of all your criticisms in all of your GT7 videos, if there was only one thing you could change to improve GT7, what would that be? For me, it'd be the AI. It's really the only thing I was looking forward to over GT Sports, and before release, the announcement of custom races had me buzzing. Huge disappointment. I hope GT8 will fix this once it's PS5 only. Well, yeah, I mean, without copying you, I agree. I'd say the AI as well. The thing is that, obviously, despite the multitude of other serious issues the game has, if the AI was good, I would still have a reason to keep coming back and playing it. You know, because I could say, okay, it gives me what I want. It gives me that experience of you know, having good races with interesting cars. I could set up what I want in custom race and just have fun. And just put the main, you know, menu books and GT mode and everything to the side and just forget about it. But the problem is that they're so bad that having the AI on is honestly more frustrating. So basically, to avoid the issues of GT7, all you can do is just do time trials on your own, pretty much. Because otherwise you're going to encounter those things that, you know, kind of drag the game down, and the AI is one of them. So yeah, that would probably be my main one as well, because if it was good, despite the issues, I still have a reason to keep coming back and play it. And that's the important thing. If I wasn't going to copy you, though, and choose something else, I'd probably say the events and the structure. So what I do is change the structure of the game back to the league format, so you know, having beginner, amateur, professional, etc. Leagues with all the different events, and then having tons of events catering to all types of cars, you know, kind of like the older Gran Turismos. And the thing is, even if the races themselves wouldn't be the best, so the AI still being crap within that, I still have a reason. Again, I still have a reason to play. I still want to complete everything, do everything, win the races, the championships, you know, earn the cars, do things like that. And that's probably the biggest sin of GT7, is that it doesn't give enough of the cars things to do. There aren't enough events to use them in. So yeah, for me that would probably be it as well. Yeah. Virgil says, since Polyphony has never done a re-release of any of the games, do you think it would be a good idea to remaster, or at the very least re-release the games in their original state for the modern consoles? Personally, I'd love it, so I always have GT3 on the ready on my PS5. Yeah, for certain. I mean, definitely, if they did that, I'd buy them straight away, pretty much. So if they realistically can, then yeah, I see no reason why not, why they shouldn't do. But I mean, it's a case of that kind of Sony's kind of been awful when it comes to this sort of thing, making all the games accessible, things like backwards compatibility. Because frankly, if we could just play, you know, PS1 and PS2 games on PS4 or PS5, then that'd be good enough for me. I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't really think a remaster or re-release would really be necessary. Because then we could just play them, but obviously we can't, and it's very frustrating. If they did want to, you know, remaster or re-release them, they might have a few issues. So the main one would be licensing. So firstly, licensing the music. So that's not a major issue, because the music, well, most of it in the games are made for the games specifically. So if they can't be bothered to go back and license some of the other songs that they had in the original release, or if it costs too much, or whatever the case may be, they can just replace the music, so that's not a big issue. But obviously the game will be different than what it originally was. The next one, the more major issue, would be cars. So for example, GT3 doesn't have a huge amount of cars, and a lot of them feature in GT7 already, so they would have the license already. But you've got to think about things, you know, more obscure cars in that game. So things like the Gillet Vertigo, how easy would it be to license that again? Or cars that may have, you know, maybe it's more complicated, a complicated situation. So things like the Ford Falcon V8 supercar, maybe like the Pano's Esperante GTR1. Depending on the situation, it might not be worth it to actually go back and license them again. And that's only GT3, which had like 180 cars. I mean, if you look at something like GT2 or GT4, it might be, it's basically near impossible to license all the cars again, and maybe even some of the tracks again. And really, what they have to weigh up is how much it would cost to do that versus what they would actually get back from the sales. And in most cases, I think it would probably be too much. So from a business perspective, they just wouldn't really care. Even if they wanted to do it in the first place, which I don't really think they do either. But if they can, they should. Because like I say, if you could get the first 4 games of the series remastered, or even just re-released on current consoles, then yeah, I would buy all of them instantly. And I'm sure a lot of long-time fans would as well. So yeah, great idea, but sadly I don't really think it's going to happen, unfortunately. Bantuatha says, there's something I would like to ask you. You said you wanted GT7 to add more features to improve it, yes? Well, today they improved the online time trial. Now there are 3 of them, which is very good, and 1 new, cough cough, menu book on Super Formula. Seems to be a very hard one. Yeah, so this is the problem when you're talking about these games that you know, in current day, is that they get updated and things change. But with GT7, it's not really enough of a change to, I guess, invalidate my points, invalidate what I'm saying, although in some cases it can change public opinion with what they do. So the first one, as you mentioned, is the time trials. I've seen people say, you know, this completely changes the economy, this completely revolutionizes the economy in GT7. It doesn't. So that's not me being cynical, that's just kind of a fact. Because, put it this way, if you get gold on all 3 time trials, you get 8 million credits. Considering that there are multiple cars costing 20 million, then yeah, it helps, but it's nowhere near a fix. And then consider that the Olympic esports time trial is a one-off, so one time only, and you also need to be really, really damn good to get that gold. You know, so guarantee 99% of people who try that are not going to get gold. Even if we assume the best case scenario and say this is going to be a regular thing, and that you're now getting 8 million credits every 2 weeks, then it's still not really a fix, since the economy is so unbalanced. Well, I mean, this makes it even more unbalanced, basically. It's something similar to what they did with Circuit Experience, where they increased the payouts. It's effectively like just slap a band-aid on it, but, you know, the implication is that the progression aspect is now gone out the window, because everything becomes trivial. If you start a game, you know, a brand new game, a brand new save, it's extremely easy because you can just do one of these events and get millions of credits within minutes. So it's like, well, you know, we've sacrificed that for the sake of this, so not really a fix. And ultimately, you know, the only fix, realistically, is to make the cars on the top end, costing the most, more reasonably priced, and also maybe give them out as prize cards from time to time, sort of like the older games. I mean, I've said this many times before, but it's because it's true. That's the formula they had, and it worked, and it was great. The formula they have now just doesn't work. To me, jacking up prize amounts, as they're doing, you know, they've done with the Circuit Experience, they're doing with time trials, to me that's an admission of failure. That's effectively them saying, you know, people cannot realistically own and buy these cars, so this is what we have to do. Either that, or people just, you know, spend the rest of their life grinding away to get the money. And neither work as a solution, to be honest. The only solution is to just tear it down and start again, frankly. It's just so broken at this point. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately it's a case that people will see this, and the perception changes. They think, oh, this is great, they're giving us way more money, they're fixing everything. It's like, no, because ultimately them having to do these things where they add events that give you so much more money is the admission that what they've made doesn't work. Like, for example, they can add an event tomorrow that means that you can get, you know, 999 million credits in a minute. Would that fix the game? Not really. I mean, it would allow you to afford everything, but as a functioning game, which has an economy, it breaks it entirely. That's what they're doing already, but on a much smaller scale. So that's my point, is that they aren't really fixing anything. They're just skewing it in a different direction, where it's still broken, but broken in a different way. That's kind of the point. Regarding the menu books now, so the Super Formula menu book, which I think I might be showing footage of now, actually. The races, the 3 races they added. So the funny thing is, it actually makes the script of my next video slightly outdated, so that's great. Albeit not by much, so it still makes sense. But the thing you need to consider is that before they added these Super Formula races, the last time they added an original event, and when I say original event, I mean completely brand new event to GT7, not more races for the same event, but completely new races for a brand new event. The last time they did that was back in October of last year. Yeah, really. It's been that long. It's quite ridiculous. So the fact that they've now finally adding more races, it's not like a situation of, well, I guess there are adding races afterwards. Like, no, they should be adding races. Like, why did it take them so long to finally start adding them again? It just doesn't make any sense. And if we're being honest, the races aren't the worst. They're reasonably long events, long races, and the grid isn't spread out too far like they are in some other events where you got like 30 seconds. In what I've seen, the Super Formula race, it's only about 10-second spread for first to last. But honestly, it says a lot when I consider those as positives. It says a lot about GT7, to be honest, you know, because frankly, that's kind of what we should expect, if not even more. But yeah, it's just a sad state of affairs. I mean, if we look at, you know, Gran Turismo has a partnership with Super Formula. So what really blows my mind is, why can't we have a proper Super Formula championship in the game with, you know, the real life drivers as the opponents, the 2023 season liveries, and racing on the official tracks raced in real life, and with full grid starts, just like the real life series. As someone who actually follows Super Formula in real life and is interested in the series, it's just like, why can't they do that? It just doesn't make any sense. It's frustrating because it feels like everything they do in GT7 has to have this sort of weird, I can't really describe it other than a Gran Turismo 7 stank to it, where it's like, oh no, we got to have the spread out grids, we got to have the fake, well, not fake, you know, the GT Pro series drivers who have to tell you something uninteresting, like, I'm going to use fuel map 5 in this race, like anyone actually cares. You know, stuff like that. It's just like, why can't it just be good? Like, you have the rights to Super Formula, you can just make it the same thing, just translate it to the game and it would be so good, but they just don't. It's like, why? I don't even know why I really bother getting angry about it at this point, because it's just the same thing that that's been happening for months at this point, well, over a year at this point. But yeah, that's where it is. I mean, sorry, this is a Q&A. I didn't mean to rant about it, but when it comes to GT7, this is just kind of how it ends up for me, it seems. But yeah, like I say, great what they've done with the new update, but ultimately doesn't really fix a whole lot, and anything that's good is kind of like, well, you should have been doing this already. So yeah, it's kind of how it is. Okay, so the final question comes in from Kevin Flynn. First off, great videos. My question is, which issues with GT7 do you think could be fixed with patches and updates, and which ones would have to be addressed in the next game in the series? So, the most obvious one for me is adding more events. So more races, championships, things like that. It's the most obvious one that they could just easily fix, but seemingly don't really recognise it as an issue, and I have no idea why. I mean, adding events, not only events from past GT games that people remember and love, but events that actually give the cars purpose, so we can actually use a lot of these cars that we collect, you know. That would make the most sense. I mean, that is, again, it's something I'm going to talk about more in my next video. But yeah, it's just blows my mind how they do not recognise this as a problem, or maybe they do and somehow just don't think it's worth fixing. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, that could easily be fixed. The second would be, I'd have to say, the AI. So I'm not really talking about implementing GT Sophie in this case. I think they could honestly just tweak the AI they have already, and it would be far better. So, well, far better than what they have at the moment. Not far better than GT Sophie, obviously. Far better than what they have now, because the one thing that I've talked about before, of course, is the stupid speed manipulation thing, where if you're behind the AI, they will just slow down, and then the closer you get, the faster they go. It's ridiculous, just not realistic, and just dumb and contrived, basically. It makes you feel like everything is just scripted, and you're wasting your time, frankly, so it's kind of lame. I mean, I've detailed this before, of course, in the AI video. And then also improving the AI speed in certain corners and places, like, for example, the first few corners at Trial Mountain, or Death Chicane at Dragon Trail Seaside. I mean, places like that, they are just so cripplingly slow. Like, it's honestly kind of impressive how slow they go. Like, I still don't understand. So fixing that obviously would be a great help already. And also, not just those specific examples, there's normally every track in the game, they have at least 1 or 2 corners where they're just a bit too slow, where it's like unrealistically so, you know. So just tweaking that slightly, and of course improving their awareness as well, so that, you know, they actually give you racing room, they don't pit maneuver you, they don't run you off the road and do the stupid things that they normally do. So just increasing that margin for error just a little bit, that would be better. And then of course changing it so most races are grid starts. You actually have a grid start where you're right next to the other cars, or at least if it's a rolling start, where the cars are actually closer together on a rolling start. Maybe even like a 2x2 rolling start, for example. Things like that. That'd be great, and they could easily implement that to most races that are already in the game, frankly. So yeah, that'd be great. What can only be fixed in the next game in the series? So basically everything else, to be honest. Every other issue I have. I mean, when you look at the whole structure of the game, the economy, the reward system, these are things that can only be fully fixed by just trashing what they already have and then starting again, frankly. I mean, you could, like I say, put sort of these band-aid fixes, as I call them, you know, giving events that give you millions of credits very easily, things like that, but that doesn't solve anything. That's more of just a you know, like I say, a minor amendment to the issues that already exist. That's kind of all it is, really. An acknowledgement that what you've created doesn't really work, so you've had to do something to try and appease people. But ultimately, the only way you're going to fix it is by just starting again, because it's just so fundamentally broken in so many ways. And to be honest, that stands for a lot of issues with GT7, sadly. So yeah, that's kind of where we are. Seems like me making those videos to complain about it is kind of meaningless then, since they can't actually do anything about it. But you know, maybe next time we'll have to wait and see. And that's all the questions. So thanks for watching, and thanks to those who submitted their own questions. This was actually a lot of fun to go through and do. And yeah, I'll probably do this again at some point down the line when the time feels right. But yeah, for now, that's it. Thanks for watching, take care, and have a good one.